Well, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you're at. My name is Bassam Haddad, and I am delighted to be joining this remarkable panel, which is the second in a series of events under the Syria Research Project, SRP, co-organized by Jadaliyya, Syria Center for Policy Research, and Security in Context Network. We are delighted to have with us three scholars of the highest form, in fact, Katty Alhayek, Rabie Nasser, and Basileus Zeno. Our speakers will evaluate the first 45 days after the collapse of the Syrian regime on 8th December 2024, and they will address the domestic and regional matters, including the circumstances that resulted in the unforeseen collapse, the pattern of recruitment and control that followed, which we will share with you something very important happened today, and challenges regarding issues of sectarianism, the media, and gender, as well as what we can expect at the end of the transitional phase in March. We will address a number of questions, including the political matters that have ensued since December 8th, the military issues, economic policy and development issues, national dialogue, diplomatic efforts, the Syrian social blocs and forces and groups and parties that have actually existed today. We learned that they were all dissolved by the decision that was taken during the conference, which we will address today. We might talk about other topics, including reconstruction efforts, refugees return, court proceedings for former officials, external aid, sectarian reconciliation, media matters, gender matters, asymmetry of developments across provinces, because when you want to work on Syria or learn about Syria, you have to be extremely cognizant, as probably with other cases, that there exist various provinces. So this doesn't mean there are many Syrias, but they are definitely different in substance in quite a few important ways. We'll also talk about emergent civil society in this series, question of ethnic groups like the Kurds. We'll talk about the U.S. presence, and of course, we'll talk about everyone's favorite topic, ISIS, which is less of an issue now, but for some reason, it always rises up to the top. Welcome, Katty, Rabie, and Basil. How are you?
Good. Thank you, Bassam, for hosting us.
Thank you for joining. And, I don't know what to say. We've been talking about this for a couple of months now. So we share in the joy of having a place that is devoid of the sort of repression we witnessed over the past several decades. But we are all apprehensive, it seems, from the looks of it, from the writings that I've read, and from your own interventions here and there. We will talk about a number of things, and I would like us to also address what happened just today, which is a major conference that resulted in the dissolution by the newly appointed president, Ahmed al-Shara, Al-Aqid Hassan Abdel Ghani. Hassan Abdel Ghani, announced that Ahmed al-Shara is the new president of the Republic of Syria in this transitional phase, and the security services, the Ba'ath Party, the army, as well as the Syrian parliament were dissolved as of today, in the hopes of replacing them with a different formula that we will be talking about. So the topic is evaluating the first 45 days. We will join everyone here again next month with another update, perhaps even do a final update during the March end of transition period. Let me introduce our first speaker, Rabie Nasser. Rabie Nasser is a co-founder and a director of the Syrian Center for Policy Research and researcher at the University of Vienna. He has an MSc in economics from Leicester University in the UK. Before joining SCPR, Nasser worked for the State Planning Commission as chief economist and director of Macroeconomic Directorate. Afterwards, he worked as an economics researcher at the Arab Planning Institute in Kuwait. Rabie joins us from Vienna, Austria. The floor is yours. Our speakers will speak for about 8 minutes to 10 minutes, and then we will open things up for questions that you can pose on the YouTube feed. I will do my best to field some of these questions. Rabie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bassam, and I'm glad to join the panel with Katty and Basileus. Yeah, I think I can start with the good start before mentioning the context of the situation. I can start that it's a historical moment for all of us as Syrians, and it's very important. And we dreamed of that for a long time, and the people suffered until we reached this point of the fall of the Assad regime. And what we repeatedly say before, that the fall of the head of the regime or the leaders of the regime is not dismantling of oppression. So I think this is the most important issue that we need to handle now. That after the space for a new formulation of the institutions, the political power, and the way that rules our lives in the future, I think we need to see how this can be in the right direction based on the experience that the Syrians accumulated with blood and pain and suffer. So this is it's beyond the joy, it's beyond happiness. It's something historical that we need to acknowledge and also to build on. Having said that, I think we have a very important indicators with this fall. The indicators related to the swift of the collapse of the regime and the behavior of the HTS in the first 10 days, which is from the 13th of November until the 8th of December. So this swift and deciding not to destroy the public institutions, and also not to revenge on the large scale from the people. I think this is also, and it was a promising indicator that we are facing an actor who can be inclusive or try to be inclusive. So having said that, I will link my intervention to two aspects. The first one that related to the regional aspect, that we have a degrading region, regardless of, let alone, the global scene. But the region is in a degrading era, from Iraq to Egypt to Yemen, and I will say the Gulf countries as well, and what we see in Palestine and beyond. So I think you can't flourish and you can't build democracy while the key actors in the region is investing in the other direction. So we suffered for 14 years from the regional actors who try to be like a mini colonial power, to start to behave like Israel, like the Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Turkey. They start to invade. They start to use their armies across the region. They start to spend money to change regimes. So we are talking about a poisoning region in terms of shifting toward justice, inclusive development, and democracy. So this is to start with, and this is also very important because a huge concern of the key actors inside Syria is to depend on regional and global actors. They build their legitimacy based on that, more than having social support and control of the internal institutions as a base of their political power. The second point, that also in the context that we are facing a substantial using of identity politics. Of course, it's not new, but actually it's faced a new era because of the lack of our idealism, our cause. The nationalism, socialism, and liberal democracy failed as a project for the people in the region, and I think the lack of vision start to fill the gap by many non-state actors, with the bringing back some ideas related to religion, ethnicity, or destructive ideas. I think new liberalism as well bring inequalities in the region, and lack of hope in the transformation, and give the wealth and money more political power, like the Gulf countries in the region. So if I add to that the global actors, like what the Russian and the Americans did, especially if we talk about the invasion of Iraq, the war on terror. So we are talking about global actors who come to countries, smash it, and dismantle the public institutions. It's not like before that they want an alliance from these countries. Now they smash the experience, the institutions, and ruin the countries that intervene in. And I think after the war on terror, we can face this in many countries in the region. So I think this is countries, and it reached the point that the Syrian regime did the grave violations of human rights, collective punishment, use all the public institutions to smash the people, and we reached the point that Israel decided that this is not enough. We are the top terrorist in the region, and did the genocide in Gaza and the war in Lebanon and Syria again. So I believe that our regional dynamics is destructive, and I hope that this will not be ruling our future in the long term. Now, I think, regardless of how the minutes of the fall of the Syrian regime, I think the factors is clear for us, that the behavior of the Syrian regime during the conflict and after the stability, quote unquote, after 2019. So there is no major threat for the regime, and there is no more, great military operations. This has created a space for the regime to behave, at least with the people inside the regime-held areas, and all the policies in this regard were increasing the inequalities, the injustice, and suppress the people, increase the poverty and marginalization of people. Besides the weaknesses of relation between the Syrian regime and Iran and Russia after the behavior of the regime during Gaza war and the attack on the war in Lebanon. So I think, having said that, it's surprising that the Turkish and other Western countries will accept that HTS is the only actor who are taking over. So this is, I think, it's an extreme group who is controlling alone the power. Now, after this glory fall of this regime, we had the hope that this actor will transcend, because there is no one actor, small actor, can control the country without an inclusion with other oppositional actors, with other factions, with other political parties. And unfortunately, what we saw in the last 45 days, that an exclusionary approach with a few closed groups who is trying to fulfill the whole political and administrative positions. The military and security services dismantled, and then we have a new military and security services, and we have a lot of seeds for long-term impact on the political scene, on the political dynamics, on the political power, on the economic. In a complete new liberalism have been so far almost implemented, and using the identity politics without the transitional justice, without any plan to address the injustices in an approach that respects the basics of the justice and the transitional justice, and then we have discussion about identity politics within the system. So the official um, interventions and interviews and negotiation is happening between majority minority, between Sunni and Christian, between the Druze and the leader. And also, I will I don't know. I will end with this, that this rapid decisions in this way to delay the dialogue, the national dialogue, and then to have the decisions on a very closed groups. Of course, they have the support now from the West. It's an extreme support. But to do that in this rapid way, I think this is an indicators of two things. The first thing is the weakness, that you want to control the power in the very short term, and this is a threatening for us, that we have a continuation of the conflict with the foundation of the conflict. And the second point is about the way that you think the power come from. So if you think that the power come from that military services and external power, like the previous regime, I think we are losing the transformation toward a better future for Syrians. I'll stop here, and then we can have further discussion with this.
Thank you very much, Rabia. I do not need to share that, or maybe I do, that Rabia, Katty, and Basileus are colleagues of ours, part of the Syria research project, and also part of the Syria page on Jadaliyya. And in my experience, have been some of the most productive, analytically astute researchers I have worked with on Syria, even though I've been working on Syria before since 1994 for a very long time. But these are some of the few people I really look to figure out what is going on, especially from an internal Syrian perspective. I do have to mention, or should mention, that Katty, Rabia, and Basil are all Syrians. Shukran, Rabia. And before we go to Katty and Basil, can you quickly, like literally within 1 minute, give us a summary of what happened today, or would you like to do this at the end?
For me?
Yeah.
Yeah, at the end. I
At the
prefer
end.
that.
طيب, okay. So we do know that we have a new president in Syria, though, so just in case you're wondering. Next, I will be turning to Katty Alhayek. Katty is an assistant professor in the School of Professional Communication at Toronto Metropolitan University in Canada, in Canada for now, because Canada might become part of the United States shortly. Alhayek's research centers around themes of marginality, media, audiences, gender, intersectionality, and displacement in a transitional context. Katty completed her Ph.D. in communication at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst in the United States here, with a graduate certificate in Advanced Feminist Studies. Katty, so delighted to have you on. I have had many conversations with you over the years, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Bassam, for hosting us, and thank you, Rabia, for your insightful presentation. I will actually build or share some ideas of Rabia while I'm talking, but as a media scholar, I actually want to share with you some images from the last 45 days and share with you some comments and some emerging research questions from the context of what's happening in the last 45 days in Syria.
Katty, if for any reason, yeah, this is happening again, Katty. When you are sharing the images, your audio is being affected. Can you try to say something?
Yes.
Yeah, your audio is not coming out right. So, is there a way? Let me see if I could. Yeah, your audio is being compromised. 1 second. Let me see if
Can you try to remove the headphone or?
do you want to go directly through the laptop just to see if that? Can you
Is
try
this
to?
better?
Yeah, much better. Okay. Alhamdulillah.
Okay.
1 second. Okay, let me try to share.
Thank you. So, as Rabie, as someone, actually, I identify as Syrian scholar activist, and I feel I came of age during the Arab Spring social movement. So, for me, on a personal note, before I share more scholarly perspective, the news of Damascus without Bashar al-Assad was very emotional moment where, as I think Syrian around the globe, we felt that our life, different form of oppression inside the country, displacement outside, you feel like your whole life flashed in front of you. And I think especially for activists of the Arab Spring, we at some point were very demoralized, and we did not feel that we will live to see this moment. So that was really a dream that came true. But after moments, you start, if you are working in intellectual or scholarly field, your analytic hat come back, and you start to observe and reflect in what's happening in the media scene and political scene inside Syria and internationally. So at the beginning, in the last 45 days, December 8, December 9, Syrian around the world were celebrating. The green flag became the official flag. Even a previous supporter of the Syrian regime who were proudly wearing what we now call the red flag. In Syrian dialect, we have this term takwiya, they shifted and adopted the green flag and joined the celebration of what is called the winning of the Syrian revolution around the world. Of course, what I want to focus on in this short presentation is the media rebranding of efforts by Ahmed al-Shari', the leader of HTS and HTS in the last 45 days. I think at the beginning, they made a strategic media effort in December 8 to go to prisons, especially Sednaya prison, that is famous for harsh torture and targeting of some rights groups said around 60,000 Syrian were killed or victimized, at least in Sednaya prison. So I think HTS made strategic media efforts to share these images, to show themselves as the people who broke this torture prisons and freed political prisoner, which was a central message of the early
peaceful social movement of the Syrian revolution in the context of the Arab Spring. And part of this media branding efforts were images even of some activists like Bashar Barhoum, who was actually an activist that's considered pro-regime. He hailed from Alawite background. He used to live in the Syrian coast, but I think around May 2024, he criticized Iran and shared some posts on social medias and went on TV interview with the Lebanese host Tony Khalifa, and I think Iran and Hezbollah were angry with him, and they asked the Syrian regime to imprison him, and some of the media efforts at that point were also framing his story that SGS is inclusive, it's freeing all political prisoner, it's social movement, people from all sectarian background are celebrating the new heroes of the Syrian nation. Also, Ahmed al-Shara made a lot of media efforts to frame himself as the savior of the Syrian nation, the one who will close all the security, Al-Assad security branches and prisons. And some media scholars also will pay attention to how he changed his clothing from more jihadist style to early on around like December 8th, he was more wearing President of Ukraine, Zelensky, a green olive style of dressing. And then now in the last 3-4 weeks, he's wearing more Western style of formal suit to appeal more to international audiences. Now, in the last 45 days, HTS is really promoting itself as inclusive government and trying to, of course, at the discourse level, to say we are gonna save the rights of all minorities and the groups inside Syria. But if like some of the research questions that I'm now interested in observing all these media images and media messages in the last 45 days is how the official message of unity and inclusion can be translated into a real transformation for Syrians and the country, and how the narratives of Syrian national identity are emerging post-Al-Assad regime against more narrative of exclusionary identity, such as pan-sectarian identity that describes Syrian in sectarian coded terms like Alawite, Sunni, Shia, Christian, Druze, and so on. So if we want to go beyond the level of the discourse that trying to rebrand the image of HTS, we see now that when the caretaker government did a political appointment, most prime minister and cabinet were hailing from the Syrian Salvation government. In HTS, they were loyalists to Ahmed al-Shara and came from only one color. Even some people were actually online mocking him that, like Bashar al-Assad, who gave a lot of power to his brother Maher al-Assad, actually Maher al-Shara, the brother of Ahmed al-Shara, was appointed a minister of health, and a lot of people were critical and not happy with this family connection. Responding to a lot of the media backlash and lack of women and minority representation in the government, they created something called a Women's Affairs Office and appointed a woman called Aisha Al-Dibs as head of that office. But as scholar of feminist media studies might say this is actually a move none to authoritarian regimes who try to like put women who doesn't represent the diversity and complexities of women interest and experience as a cover for their more traditionalist exclusionary work. And actually, immediately, Aisha Dibes, who is really disconnected from the realities of Syrian women who belonged to an elite class and was living in Turkey, and there is a lot of actually controversy and problematic report about her work with women, Syrian women in Turkey, immediately had a lot of media statements that were problematic and that see women rules in society restricted to their, what she say, God-given nature. Another thing that tried, like HGS tried in the last few days to rebrand themselves. They hired another woman for as a chief of the central bank. Her name is Maysa Sabrin, and immediately the Minister of Foreign Affairs was using this appointment for what I will say like their rebranding effort in Europe. The third woman that they hired is Muhsina al-Mhisawi, and they hired her as governor of Sueda in southern province, and she's the only member, according to my knowledge, who hail from minority, like religious minority background in this new government led by HTS. So this at the level of more official statement of HTS and their political appointment. Other observation I'm having from Syria's online spaces is spread of misinformation is really huge. Also efforts to secretarize further what's happening in Syria. Some problematic pages like Marsad al-Aqliyat Suriyat, like Syrian Minority Observer, who were now, they call themselves Istiqlal al-Sahel al-Suri, like the Syrian Coast Independence Party. These people play on sectarian narrative a lot. They're really sketchy, like no one's, the founders, we know that they are based in Europe, but I think there is a lot of misinformation and legitimate concern about them and their connection with Israel. So that's something going on. Lastly, I want to conclude on something positive, that despite all these challenges at the government level and more misinformation and problematic organization that emerging, there is real effort toward civil peace by groups who are working, especially like in Homs, in Hayat Tadamun in Damascus, in the Syrian coast. Syrian activists are organized from like different backgrounds, are organizing themselves and trying to mitigate any rising conflict or tension based on sectarian grounds. This is some of the observation. Happy to share with you more perspective later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katty. Really appreciate your commentary and presentation. I would like to ask a few questions. I'll keep them until the end. Let's move to Basileus Zeno, who is our last speaker and will also be sharing slides from what I understand. Basileus is an assistant professor in political studies at Trent University in Canada. His work has combined research advocacy and policy work on political violence, digital media, forced migration, security, human rights, religion, cultural heritage, and decolonizing methodologies. He received his PhD in political science from the University of Massachusetts Amherst in 2021. His research won Best Paper Awards from the American Political Science Association, APSA, and the International Studies Association, ISA, and the Syrian Studies Association. أهلا وسهلا Basileus. Would you prefer Basile or Basilius?
It's the same. I'm still the same person, but Basileus, yeah.
Basilius. هلا.
Whatever
Basilius, the
easier
floor
for
is
you.
yours.
Thank you. Let me share my slides just.
Okay.
Can you see my slides?
Yes. Give me a second. You should be good.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Rabia. Thank you, Katty. And thank you, Bassam, for inviting us to reflect on this critical juncture. I think it's the single most, amongst many important events, but in the lives of Syrians and in the history of contemporary Middle East, it's definitely a period that changed the face of Syria forever. So I would start since no one have actually deep analysis yet, to be with all modesty, with knowledge, because things are unfolding, things are intentionally ambiguous, and during the Q&A I can reflect why I think it's more intentional. But I will reflect on the ambiguous transition. And just before we started, we just the background of the picture. It's the credit to a brilliant photographer, Guevara Nimmer, who this is the statue of Assad and Der Atiyah. Anyone who was traveling from Damascus or Sweda to Homs, he will see that statue, which was huge and so dominant. So shortly before we had our meeting, there was supposed to be, and we can talk more about this later in the during the Q&A. But since we don't have much information yet, journalists, media personalities were waiting for this first speech to address the Syrian people after the victory and the departure of the Assad regime. And then last minute, basically, people were preparing there and they found telegrams, messages here and there. Is it true? Is it not true? And this kind of ambiguous. And we got these two breaking news. Basically, the de facto leader, Ahmed al-Shara or Julani, was named as the country's president for the transitional period. And more problematically, they just dissolved the Majlis Shab, the parliament, and also the constitution, but also they already gave themselves the upper hand, the executive branch, over the legislative branch in the country. And as you see in the picture, that's from the official news to the left, it's all military men, and they gave their back symbolically to the audience, local audience. And I think this is a very significant after observing the performance of this caregiver government over the past 52 days. Just as a quick reflection on how things went so quick and so fast, they were shocking advancement, but not surprising for anyone who is or has been following Syria for a long time. It's just the how almost bloodless the capture of Damascus was, which was a welcome, of course, approach, and with that was less than anyone has anticipated in their own writings. So just to reflect, like on this map, like December 3rd, between December 3rd to the left and December 16th to the right, you will see the red was representing the Syrian government controlled area, and then it became all under the control, almost the control of the HTS and its allies. And the yellow is the where the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces are still there, and that's where the eyes are directed right now. So today I will just reflect on a 3 set of challenges. They have, I think, 8 points quickly, and where we are heading from now. The first one is the relevance of the implementation regarding the challenges of the implementation of the UN Security Resolution 2254, which was adopted unanimously in December 2015. The Assad regime, of course, and delayed the implementation of that, and they missed that golden opportunity in having a genuine transitional justice. And the representative from the Shara government and teams are making an argument with better sense that it's irrelevant today because the party that was involved in that, which is the regime party, is no longer there. In addition to that, there is some of the challenges here because if you look at the language, they calls on member states to prevent and suppress terrorist acts committed specifically by HTS predecessor, which is al-Nusra Front, and also ISIL. Just to be clear, I'm quoting here. I don't endorse or adopt and problematize the language of terrorism to start with. That's the language of the resolution itself. The second challenge is crippling economic sanctions, and I think Rabie and you are the veteran here in terms of political economy. So, but you would see anyone who is following and has been following the media over the past few days will see like there is an obsession, complete obsession with lifting the sanctions unconditionally. Rightly so, but there are conditions, and it's not as easy as possible, and it's complicated because you have the EU, you have the UN, and you have the US, which is the most crippling sanctions. And there are some problematic and conditional articles that is now up to Trump, which is not very welcoming. So the fact also that's how absurd these categories like terrorism is. Julani himself was on the HTS, where on the US specially designated global terrorist pursuant the executive order of 1300-224 since 2013. It was only lifted in December 2024 as a gesture from the the Biden administration. We see also, and this is under the point that you and Rabie also, I hope, or during the Q&A would reflect, we see really another obsession with selling out the remaining, whatever left over from the destroyed public sector. And there is calls for promotion of privatization as the magic portion that will salvage Syria, and it will become a new Singapore or Dubai. That's literally how they are promoting this project. That would reward businessmen, are arguably warlords and their regional supporters, specifically in the Gulf and Turkey. Just to reflect on that and the demand which happened, lifting the government support for breads and fuel. By mid 2023, over 90% of Syrians are estimated to live under poverty line. At least 12 million, more than half of the population, could not access or afford enough quality food. They rely on hawala or basically sending money to your own family, including our families, all of us here. At least 15 million required some form of humanitarian aid to survive. And with the decision of the Trump administration 2 days ago to cut out all humanitarian aids or any aids, with the exception of Israel and Egypt, it should be taken into consideration here. More than 600,000 children were chronically malnourished, and I'm not going to delve deeper also in the question of education, for instance. The second set of challenges I see it really concerning is what I argue I'm seeing, and this is concerning given that Ashara Julani several times, rightly so, emphasized that the nightmares in the aftermath of the occupation of Iraq haunted him and forced him to change his and rethink about many of the approaches that were taken by the Islamic State in Iraq around that time. And one of the things that anyone who is having communication with their families, friends, will see, like, there is an absurd decisions to dismiss all employees from the public sectors, calling them fulul or shadow or ghost employees. Everyone is basically employed with names that are getting. Definitely, there is this part of corruption, but to penalize everyone and basically dismantle the whole public institutions and people who are basically relying on $14 a month or $24 a month, which is insufficient, and now they have nothing. This is a recipe for a scenario I'm afraid could lead us, which is preventable, to an Iraqi scenario. We see that a similar approach to de-Baathification process in the military, security ministries, and the police department. So consequently, we see increasingly undisciplined, vindictive individuals and groups under the HTS umbrella and alliance, which is known as the deterrence of aggression, engage in kidnapping, murdering, and public humiliation of detainees. Another challenge is the future of the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces, as Turkey now has the upper hand in shaping these relations. And we see problematically that there is increased xenophobic and hate speech directed towards the Syrian Kurds, in comparison with the almost complete silence towards the aggression from the Israeli side. Because Israel, for instance, unprovokably had used their lawlessness, and in the aftermath of the genocide in Gaza, and they de facto NATO'd Syria. The IDF had destroyed 80% according to their statistics, and they showed that in footages that they shared. The Syrian military capability in the first 48 hours, while our friends were celebrating in Damascus. Initially, they thought these bombardment and attacks came from the Russian. Turns out it's the Israeli, and I have an argument around that, but they wanted to weaken the post-Assad state further and prevent it from fighting against radical groups, ISIS-like, or defectors, or the more radical parts in the alliance under the HTS later, if or rather than when they revolt against al-Julani. The other part that is interlinked to this is the Trump-Netanyahu cooperation and violation of international law, which we know from the previous administration, the Trump administration, the first term, when he gifted Golan Heights, which is a violation of international law, of course. But the question is, would giving up the Golan Heights be the price to be paid to lift the sectoral sanctions? Is that the price? Is this what explained the complete silence towards the violation of the Israeli, who are 15 kilometers away from Damascus? They even targeted last week an envoy that had civilians and also member of the HTS in the Syrian land. That's not Hezbollah, that's not Iranian militia as they will claim. The other challenge is regarding post-Syria challenge is actually the question of justice, transitional justice. We see horrendous footages of the deliberate destruction, manipulation, tampering with, looting of evidence-sensitive documents, including top secret documents that were shared on TikTok by influencers, which is a disaster. Also, we see unauthorized access and tampering with crime scenes, including in a Tadamon massacre site by activists and media workers. We see a lack of interest or initiatives from the caregiver government to protect the prisons, mass graves, or meeting with victims' families. They are meeting with outside. They have two audiences, and that's one of my arguments. We have over 113,000 disappeared persons. Some of them are close friends. Some of them are relatives. Some of them are, everyone has lost someone. And this is based on the documentation of from the Syrian Network for Human Rights. This is just a sample of what is going on. Imagine yourself digging deeper into passport and documents to find any shred of evidence about the fate of your loved ones, because the government, de facto government, wasn't interested in actually stopping this. Even worse, like we have example in Latakia, where they painted the walls of a prison cover, which is the most valuable, amongst the most valuable evidence. We'll conclude with a couple of samples here. We do have qualified networks. We do have qualified Syrians who were working for over 14 years in documentation, such as the Syrian Network for Human Rights, such as the Syrian Justice and Accountability Center, such as the Association of Detainees and Missing Persons of Sednaya Prison. So instead of relying on rumors, exaggerations, we have brilliant scholars and activists who actually work meticulously to document these violations. And finally, what's concerning now is we see increasingly building on Katty as well and Rabie, instrumentalization for identity politics, secularization of sect-coded violence. And that's also, we see an expansion of the post-invasion war of Iraq, the regional sectarian narrative where Iran Shia minorities are the evil, the only people who committed, from that perspective, violations and crimes against the Sunni, where we see Sunni-based grievances. I don't endorse these concepts at all, and I problematize them, but I see one-dimensional identity projection based on ancient hatred. We see terms like Sunni versus Shia, minorities versus majority, Christian versus Muslim, etc., going on and on. Recently, 2 days ago, there was, or 3 days ago, there was an attack on a civilian town, Fahel and Hamas. Initially, those who denounced these attacks were accused of being fulul, who basically remnant, like similar to Iraq, I'm afraid. So anyone who is criticizing these kind of violation is sympathizer with Assad. Everyone was made basically as a general, and like let's not be clear here. You cannot exceed. No one has the right to execute or engage in extrajudicial killing in any settings. This is not clashes. They claim it was based on clashes. So they reverse back over the past few days. But we have initiatives like the Civil Peace Group. They are doing a great job. It's a cross-class. It's between a coalition between those who are inside Syria, across different regions, and outside Syria, from different background, from different ethnicity, different positionalities, and they work together towards a better Syria. We have also a website. Sometimes they do also mistakes like Verify, Ta'akkad. They are doing what they do, sometimes problematically, but they do a good job in urging people to verify. Finally, Rabie and I cooperated also on with the Syrian Center for Policy Research, because we saw the significance of the politicization of identity politics in the context of Syria, and as we see it today increasingly being projected. I don't use identity in my research. We use that to refer to the appeal and effect of identification to one's sect, which is in the case of Syria means political identification around Alawiness, around Sunniness, around Shianess. And to build on what Katty said, we see increasingly after December 8, 2024, platforms, suspicious platforms, some of them calling for intervention from the Israeli, from France, from like, they have anonymous administrators. They document problematically, like the Syrian minority. They claim they took videos out of context. Sometimes we don't know these videos. Where is their source? What is the date? There is no verification, and they disseminate this fear over and over. This is an example. Lamia Nasrin Hamoud, who claimed to be working with the UN, UNICEF, she is more likely is a fake person. She has over 41,000 followers, and they disseminate and they amplify these violations. I'm not saying there aren't violations, but there are overemphasis on this binary between minorities versus majority. Building on my research, and this is the last slide, during the, I think these early stages are significant in terms of analyzing the outcome, the consequence of what will happen. As I documented the early stages of the Syrian uprising and how the narrative of sectarianization became overemphasized, even when the facts on the ground are less sectarian, more class-based differences, for instance. We should examine the role of local actors, supra-local actors, Arab TV satellites, in the way how they silence certain voices, amplify other violations, and the role of social media, especially influencer in this age, which was very different from the early stages of the uprising. And we hope the best for Syria. We have to work for the best for Syria. Millions were affected, and they deserve better, and we to live in dignity, actually, and peace, and not to have another Haraki Tashihi corrective movement in their lifetime. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Basileus. And we are now going to start the conversation. Oh, hi, Katty, and ahlan wa sahlan. أهلا
Sorry, I
وسهلا.
thought the panel was 1 hour.
No, the panel is a little longer. Actually, we're just starting the Q&A, and I hope you can participate. I'll leave it up to you if you want to introduce the little one, but let me start with asking Rabie a couple of questions. There's a lot to talk about and ask about, so we are not going to exhaust everything. We will have another conversation in February and in March based on the Syria research project, and we will have other folks joining. Rabie, I mean, I have a lot to ask about, but can you start by telling us something about when is the actual end of the transitional period, and what can we expect regarding next steps in forming a government at that point, given what happened today and given what has transpired? And the other question I'd like to field to you, because that's something that you and I work on, and others as well, and that is, can you address the emerging neoliberal discourse coming out of Syria, from Ahmed al-Shalah's words in particular, and the attendant potential economic policies that we're likely to see, if we have not seen them already, in the first 45 days? Talk about free market and so on, which kind of preceded so many other words that one expected to hear regarding transparency, inclusion, and whatnot. So the floor is yours, and Katty and Basile, feel free to comment on this, although I have similar questions for you.
Well, I think today is the end of the transitional period, because I think there is no need for 100 days to have the our national dialogue. It ends today by having the factions, not all factions.
Can you distinguish between what you want to say and what you're being sarcastic about?
No, I'm serious. I'm serious. I think today we have a closed meeting that appointed the president for the next transitional period, which should be a decision took by the national dialogue. They have a decisions about the constitutions, the parliament, the Baath party, the factions, and which is the national dialogue. National dialogue can, if the national dialogue inclusive, can give some legitimacy for that. But for now, I think it's. I feel that that there is a fear. There is a fear that they will lose the power, so they are in hurry, and I'm. This is the only way that I see it, because you can be inclusive and you can have a social support. The people now will welcome any step toward more inclusivity, and you have a fragmented country. It's not a fragmented country only from social point of view. It's from political point of view. It's still fragmented country. Not all factions accept that to have a negotiation with the power under HTS, and which they don't want to negotiate. They think they have the whole country, and they don't see that they are part of the country, and they need to build a bridge with others, at least to build the first 3 to 4 years, to be able to impose their conditions, to convince the people that they are the future. I mean, this hurry in taking such a decision, it's losing of opportunities. We repeatedly said that at least Bashar al-Assad lost the opportunity of Damascene Spring, of the 2006, after the Tammuz war, and after the war on Gaza in 2007 and 9. I mean, and 2011, 2012, after the collapse of ISIS, they have huge opportunities and they lost it. I think they believe in, I mean, they believe that they have to smash the people to control the power. I don't know if this is part of Machiavelli chapters to convince themselves that they are ruling, but the basics that they need a social support, a social and demographic integration with the political power. We called it in the center, the institutional suffocation, that you rules the country and you have a huge gap between you and people, not just on officially, like you don't have a liberal democratic institutions, even indirectly you lost this connection. Now you don't have the connection yet. Don't forget that you are one faction, and don't forget that you are a product of war, and don't forget that you are not representing the freedom, justice in your narrative before 8th of December. So you have to transcend to convince the people that you are part of this political power. And if you control the military and the security and the key resources, and you have the international support, why this fear of having an international, a national dialogue? Why the fear of having inclusive dialogue? I really don't understand why you are losing such a big opportunity to build a new country with stability. The second thing, in the northeast, so there is a place in Syria which is not unified yet, even on the surface, because the Turkish has a different agenda toward the Kurdish forces. So instead of, I mean, investing all the 100 days to unify the country, to convince the people that there is a trajectory toward the future, we have this vague at the beginning, but in the last 3 weeks, I don't think this is vague. When you decide how to deal with the public sector, with the officers, and you decide that those people are not qualified. So this is a huge decision that needs years to decide. You didn't announce a transitional justice. You didn't invite the different people to work on their expertise or in their capacities to help in the transitional justice. So the people start the revenge, and you can see it everywhere. You don't know how to deal with the lack of resources and the poverty and injustices. And you can see that now, if you have a problem with your properties, you go to people which is not qualified. You take two witnesses, and this is a huge transformation of the wealth of Syria again and the power of Syria again, without taking into account how to deal with a democratic, with institutions and a political and social support. The second point about the new liberalism, I think this, from their side, it's not new liberalism. It is reduce the burden of state. So they want slim state. They want a state with military and security forces with the minimum responsibilities. Because this country, without a developmental state, without a private sector that respect the code of ethics for transition from conflict to post-conflict, without a civil society that contribute to the economy, you can't build this economy. You can't have like 300-400 billions as a debt, which will not work with such an institution. So this is, it's like we are reducing the burden from the state. Let the private sector manage their business. And now the domestic businesses cannot handle like privatization of public sector or building infrastructure. So we need the Turkish companies. The Turkish companies, the Gulf companies, the Western companies. Can we afford to do that? We don't have resources, and we don't have the people to work for not trusted institutions. So what what we can see from different decisions in this regard, that you are reducing the role of developmental state. The second point in the economy, that the private sector, okay, you need a competitive and free market. Great. How do you build that? By opening the borders for cheap prices. They reduce the customs in eggs and milk to be imported from Turkey. Now Syria can produce 1 million tons of milk, and in 2 years we can recover the chicken and eggs. This is an agriculture country with a very famous agricultural sector. How you can compete? You are coming up of the conflict. You need to support your people to produce. This is the key now for them to have an income and for them to sell in the domestic market. Now you are giving a conditions that none of the private business in Syria will survive, and this will cannot be continued. The third thing is that you liberalize the prices of fuel and of electricity, and you increase the prices of bread, etc. Is this a speculation? I mean, how you will pay the cost on the international price while you need a support for businesses for 5 to 10 years to start their work, It's unbelievable why there is a hurry. I will repeat this, and I think this is a kind of the hurry to control the power, which I think is not controlling the power, is using the moment. I hope again that this will be like a rapid decision that lead to a revisions. Soon, to include other parties, to open the dialogue, and not to take it in this direction. Uh, and I will link to this to the justice, because I believe if this new authority, at least the what we hear from the different channels, so there is no discussion about democracy. So if your label is the collapse of tyranny or the fall of tyranny, so what's the next sentence? What's the next sentence of the collapse of tyranny? If you are a revolution against the tyranny, so what's your sentence? So why this reduced form of transition or transforming from conflict to post-conflict? What I can see from this, it's a new liberal economic policies will increase inequalities and will not address the injustices, and we will not have a healthy economy. If we look to the building institutions, which is exclusionary, you have now more injustice, that you can see it in because of there is a huge parties in the country which is not part of the political decision, and apparently it's the accountability will be very difficult, since now the president will appoint the parliament, and we have now one person in the palace. So this is now the key, which is in the 45 days, the people talking about the person, about him, about the person in the palace, etc. And the justice. So there is no talk about the violations, how to deal it in a systematic way. There is a kind of list of people who are need to be arrested. Their list, we don't know how they proceed, and we don't have the belief in a separation of power and authorities. This is not even as something to talk about. So yeah, without talking, people claiming that I have a gloomy picture about the situation, but I see I'm not talking about gloomy. I think there is a huge opportunities. I see that there is many decisions can ruin this. I hope we are not continue with this direction.
Thank you, Rabia. I have other questions, but I was going to turn to Katty. Let's wait until she gets back. Basil, I have a question for you. You've done remarkable work on sectarianism in Syria, and you've won all these awards that I shared. So can you tell us a little bit about the challenges ahead for unification, especially in light of talk of dividing Syria or of the realities of a Syria divided? So can you address that even more than what you have already mentioned? And if you can also tell us a little bit about what do we make of the positions of many Western countries, especially the United States, who are voicing off on the interference of non-Syrian countries, which is almost comical, and it reminds me of Donald Rumsfeld when he was so pissed off with Iran for interfering in Iraq in 2004 and 5 after the United States fraudulently and brutally and barbarically invaded Iraq on false terms. So now we are hearing this about other countries interfering being a problem by the United States, including Iran interfering in Syria, and that's a problem while being despicably quiet. And despicably is the nicest word, I guess, because this is like online and we have to watch our language, while being the US, that is, being despicably quiet or even supportive of Israel's expansion into Syrian land to the south and the southwest. So we're talking about the Kurdish situation. We're talking about Turkey, which gave the green light to HTS, presumably as a function of some sort of understanding that we have yet to find out with the United States, perhaps, given what we have heard that the United States recently is, at least Trump is calling for the potential withdrawal of American military. And then, of course, the expansion of Israel, which on the one hand is not a shock. On the other hand, the recipients of this news in the West basically just sit there doing very little while speaking of the integrity of territory, democracy, and the non-interference of foreign states. So it's a lot, but I'm sure you can handle it.
Yeah, that's so I think there are short-term objectives and long-term objectives. Like any time we talk about identity or institutionalization of identity, protection of whatever form of identity, that's a long-term project, right? You don't produce identity overnight, but you sow the seed for the future. Why I'm saying that? On January 1st, 2024, right after the new year, Syrians opened their eyes to find that the de facto caregiver government changed the school curriculum. For me, as someone who did research on this issue, it's not surprising. For many, were surprised. Why? And you don't have the right, etc. The most important thing was to look into the details, into the changes that they had made. One of them is, I argue, they built on the experience of the US aid interference in Afghanistan with the indoctrination of refugee Afghani in the refugee camp in Pakistan. They did an experiment that was very successful in implementing violent interpretation of Islam and history of Afghanistan against secularism and against the Soviet Union and communism in the country. 10 years later, they had really an army of young, that was with a fund from University of Nebraska on the one hand, and Saudi Arabia. It was during the Reagan administration. Why I'm saying that? Because I saw this pattern again with ISIS. I saw this pattern again during the Syrian conflict. Over the past 14 years, you have, we should be aware, we have a generation who lived and were adults before the uprising, and you have a generation who grew up in the context of the uprising with fundamentally different identity from their parents. Why I'm saying that? Because when you look at the content that they change, anything that is about national pride, about the role of women in making Syrian history, about Jul Jamal, who was one of the first people basically who sacrificed his life during the 1956 attack on Egypt after the nationalization of the Suez Canal. All these reflections on the national history of Syria has been deleted or suggested to be deleted. That's not new. That was their experiment in Idlib. So they expanded that to the Syria state. Because my argument is their objective is not the now, but actually the future generation. Future generation won't know the Syrian history that we grow up knowing it. That's one point. The second point, I think problematically, the representative of Western powers, including like Germany and the French, who explicitly call for the protection of women and minorities, actually they are pouring fire on gas, like it's already in the making, which means like they frame minority as something that is component, homogenized, identified, to be protected with this colonial mentality. That actually instigated reactions that we saw it on social media, an attack on even activists who basically were living in exile and resisted Assad. Some of them died in prison as being basically with coming from background of minority without identifying themselves as a minority. Then they became suspicious. Whereas if you are from the so-called majority, then you are, even if you were silent, you have basically a pass, a carte blanche. I think that's not the making of it. That's the Western power are highly implicated in this, specifically Germany, who basically supported the genocide explicitly in Israel, and they came to Syria to lecture us, and they went to Sednaya. So I think that they are producing a narrative that is very dangerous in this context, and actually giving leverage to the de facto government in the way how they are dealing with that. The second point, due to the lack, as Rabie said, it seems what they did today, they were afraid of losing power because they are operating within a mentality of loyalism, and that's how they were successful in before Idlib. They were successful in the competition between al-Nusra and Daesh, ISIS. There was a very significant period where you have loyalists who remained with you until the last minute. And in Idlib, that was the system of governance that was also integrated into war economy and also the economy of Turkish sphere of influence. So there were, I remember early in the early days of January, we knew through connection that the invitations will be sent to individuals for the national dialogue, which, as Rabie said, it's a dead end now and useless. So the invitation would have been sent to 1,200 individuals, not organizations. And that's all. I think it's a key. They want you as individual being invited based on your categorized background as a loyalist or as someone who will be identified as a Christian by them. Then we have actually representative of women, we have representative of minorities by having 1, 2, 3 person, etc. And I think this is a ticking bomb. Though to conclude on more optimistic notes, I see that the expulsion of sectarianized narrative on social media, similar to the early days of the uprising, is way more amplified than actually on the ground. I'm not physically now on the ground, but we are in communication with family, friends, networks. We have WhatsApp groups, etc. So the main concerns on the ground right now is mostly like class-based distinction, where it became evident that the current caregiver government is only hosting, welcoming, and privileging voices from Western center of power to lift the sanctions. But not just that, when they receive Syrians, it's affluent Syrians. who comes from the United States. So, for instance, they received like scores of women, Syrian American women who came from the United States. That's a good welcoming gesture. I'm not criticizing them, but at the same time, he didn't see a single woman or a single mother of one of the detainees. And people are demanding the fate. I can't emphasize that more than enough. You cannot skip this stage of Syria. We need a high commission. We need a ministry to actually investigate the fate of the disappeared people, which is a significant number in Syria. You cannot ask people to move on when actually you stamp over their pain and say, yeah, that's not a priority. The priority is electricity. Qatar is going to pay the first 6 months of salary, of your stipend. Actually, to blackmail people with their basic rights and basic needs, I think that's not very promising. Finally, every single day in Syria, across all parts of Syria, there are grassroots movement that is operating like bees, actually. And they are the hope. They are the ones who continue to actually to challenge, and I think they will pose a challenge to the current authority and also to voices from diaspora who are going to, as tourists, basically, to impose their own vision and expertise rather than learning and actually working in more cooperative way with local communities. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Basil. Katty, we were trying to
Yes.
ask you to share something, but you had skipped out for a second. So let me ask you, what is it in your estimation and based on the work that you've been doing, what are the prospects for all of this discussion, even though you touched on it, but people would like to know two things. Well, I also would like to know two things. First, on the question of portrayal, if you know, how will this period, this transitional period, which is not going as we learned today and as we heard from Rabia, which is not going very well in terms of the question of inclusion, transparency, and so on. So far, even though one has to admit that after decades of the kind of rule that we had in Syria and the repression that took place, there were some really positive developments in terms of peace and order and security, and the absence of mass scale retributions and so on, despite the fact that individual cases did exist of such retribution. How will this coming period be portrayed? Both in, I'm not sure if you are clued in on the Arabic media, especially Al Jazeera, which seems to paint everything in a rosy manner when it comes to Syria. Regarding developments there, especially in terms of the opposition, and it has done that for many years. But also on the question of gender, which can sometimes be overblown, just like the US overblew the question of gender, but in an opposite direction when it came to Afghanistan and so on. If you can just tell us what you expect in sort of the coming months, and how do you expect it to be portrayed on these two questions of, you know, media portrayal as well as gender relations and developments.
So first of all, like so far, I think like yes, it HTS outperform like on a lot of like they came from jihadist background, but they really try to address like national unity in a lot of ways. I watched few of Al-Shari'a interviews. In many of them, he was addressing like I will tell what he was saying and then I will comment on it. He said multiple times that I don't blame minorities that they did not join the Syrian revolution because the regime was telling them المسيحية على بيروت والعلوية على التابوت, like Christian will go, like if we collapse, like one of the Syrian regime messages was that Syrian Christian who are Syrian will go or who will flee to Beirut in Lebanon, like where more Christian population exists, and the Alawite will be thrown to the Mediterranean Sea. But at the same time, I think this and part of Al Jazeera portrayal or Gulf Pact TV station representation of what's happening in Syria is trying to take the social movement, like the activism that happened in the context of the Arab Spring out of the context, like trying to dehistorize what's happening, like taking that history out, like making, oh, it was this like a successful Sunni revolution against an Alawite regime, which wasn't. And from the beginning, of course, which I always like say, like one resistance tool to that narrative, always going back to that early years and analyzing Syria, everything happening until now in the context of the Arab Spring is social movement against authoritarian regime. But unfortunately, the current political moment globally, it's the winning and the rise of fascism, the rise of conservative right-wing politicians around the globe, in the US, in Europe, in Latin America, in the Gulf, the whitewashing that happening in Saudi Arabia with like this joy awards, like everything at the regional level and the global level, like support more authoritarian type of new government in Syria. I don't think like a true democracy, like no one regionally or globally, the big regional and international players want a true democracy in Syria. I personally believe from observation, and I have family and friends inside Syria, like almost everywhere, and part of my family actually stayed in Idlib under Al-Julani rule for the last like decade. So I think like if an election would happen like today in Syria, he would have won like fair and square. Like people loved him or had like hope for him, but I don't think like election, like true election or like true democracy is on the agenda or on the table. I don't think. I think nationally, HTS leadership, Al-Sharia cares about military groups and compromising with them. And internationally, he cares about lifting the sanctions and international aid and fund for his agenda. In terms of gender, I also like think I always have hope, like this leftist quote, I'm pessimistic because of the intellect, but optimistic because of the will. I think a lot of people who were activists and lost a lot will continue their activism to push the new leadership in Syria toward like doing better. In terms of gender, like Al-Assad regime, did he like really support women? No, he co-opted feminist movement. He used women and feminism as part of their propaganda machine in the same way that Bush administration did when they invaded Iraq and Afghanistan. Did Bush administration in the US really supported feminists locally or supported women's rights inside the US? No. But when they invaded Afghanistan, they said, oh, like we're saving Syrian women. Similarly, and we have actually, Basileus and I co-authored a paper analyzing Syrian regime co-optation of feminism throughout the Syrian conflict and beyond to appeal for international audiences and say that they are part of this war to save women and minority from terrorism. So the same way, I think like gender will play the same propaganda tool in the hands of the new government. Like I showed in my presentation, they're doing this appointment as a service, not like to support any like uh, true feminist or true women's right, whatever like you want to say, agenda on the ground. And the example I said about the head of the Syrian women office, that she's actually disconnected. Even if you want like to go there raw and say like even like Sunni women, even like women with the opposition who like suffered a lot, like low class women, diversity of women experience from the opposition at the hand of the Syrian regime. They're not addressing that. When the woman Aisha Dibis said, "Oh, like I want women to like," I don't like remember exactly what she said, but something about like obeying their husband. Like how many women still have a husband? Like a lot of women in Syria actually from the groups that supported the Syrian regime either lost their husbands, either have male at their house who are disabled because of the war, or found themselves for many reasons head of household. So we have a country where women constitute large number of the population, and many of these women, especially in terms of a class analysis, like women who stayed inside the country, found themselves female heads of household. Like no one talking about them, no one addressing them. We are like talking about even like gender discourse that is out of the economic and social realities of the majority of women inside the country. So I did not like hear any meaningful addressing of the majority of women's need inside the country. Like most stuff were ideological in terms of more Islamic ideological narrative.
Thank you very much, Katty. And I'm not going to keep you all very long. I just have a very quick question for all of you, actually. And then I will close. The question is specifically as Syrians, and this will go probably beyond the analytical to an extent. As Syrians, as people who are not living in Syria for reasons that have a lot to do with what happened in Syria, and I know that one would like to go back and so on. But as Syrians, what do you think can be envisioned in terms of change? What would you hope for within the realm of reason in this world? So I'll ask Rabie, Katty, and then Basile, and feel free to say a thing or two, but rather, in summary form, about your family and friends, their whereabouts and their safety, and anything you'd like to share about that personal dimension. I know that you all have family there, and if you would like to say anything about how they are taking things, family and friends, and what is it that you envision or they envision?
Shall I start? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I think it's for me it's reasonable since you insist in this word and reason, etc. I think it's reasonable to think about a new actor to open Damascus for political discussion for all actors. This will increase the legitimacy for all. I think this will unify the country again, and this will bring the refugees from outside to inside the country to work and to start with this process, announcing a long-term social congruences during 2 years of dialogue, asking the different actors to come and discuss, so factions to discuss with the communities what is the future of these military groups and how the new military should be, from the positioning and from the priorities of the people. I think this lead for many solutions for what we are talking about. So having a vision for a space that the people can contribute to, uh, will be the country will be stronger because the people believe in these institutions, and the people trust that this institutions is a lead for the future and their voice. And also, this will bring the different power inside, in terms of the people who has the wealth, the people who has the expertise, the relations inside and outside, to support this process in terms of economic policies, social policies, and most importantly, the institutions and political policies. This will give more space for negotiate with the external actors and to ask the foreign forces inside Syria to withdraw. I know also this is not easy, but this will be easier if you have this social support. I think this how I see that this pathway could. It's not from my side. It's a wish list at all. I think this will be a very practical for any political actor who want to be in a stable country or otherwise. I think we still subordinated people losing because of the oppression and huge, long 14 years of conflict. We are still the same people. So the people under the first fear will subordinate directly. And what we see that the people are shifting their positioning because there is a fear and there is a defeat which cannot be removed with one event. It should be a huge process to gain the trust and to gain the belief that we can be heard and we can be contributing. So to overcome this subordination, we need this kind of shift, and which is a very long and difficult to do with establishing the new republic, quote unquote.
Thanks, Rabia. Do you want to say anything about connections? All right, Katty. The same question. What is it that you would like to see happen? What do you envision within the realm of the possible, but also the reasonable? Rabia, I was not highlighting reason as an abstract form or thing. I was highlighting what's reasonable as in a realistic vision, given what is happening in Syria, given the limits that we have observed that emerged actually in late November when the green light was given. The giver of the green light already has limits, whoever that may be beyond Turkey. Anyway, Katty.
I think, personally, one of the first things that I need, Syrian society as a whole, to have is space of healing. There were atrocity. I don't think there is a single family who wasn't affected by the violence. And I actually personally after the fall of the Syrian regime, I will look names of loyalists of the Syrian regime who send me threats or harassment. And believe it or not, the Syrian regime punished them. Like, that's the thing. Like, he acted as a mafia, like The Sopranos. If you ever watch that show, like by the end of The Sopranos TV show, he even kills his favorite nephew, like his right hand. Similarly, like the Syrian regime, like some media professor who was like handing over activists to security branches to like disappear or be killed. A few years ago, I discovered that she like had a fallout with the Syrian regime, and they kind of fired her or something. So what I'm saying that even, of course, people who, I'm not saying people who like committed crimes or were like torturing at the prisons, but I mean Syrian society as a whole has went through collective trauma, and we need space of healing. And first of all, we need to acknowledge what happened. People of prisoners who until now did not find them in, for example, in Sednaya prison. They need to know what happened. We need transitional justice. We need to know what happened to our loved ones, to our friend, to our family members who disappeared or killed by the Syrian regime. So this collective healing needs to happen. This acknowledgement needs to happen. Until now, this issue is oppressed, like saying, oh, like we have like more priority, more economic priorities, and at the same time we are hearing like the economy is super bad. Like for examples, I talk with my families. No one is selling or buying mostly anything. There is no money. Everyone I know depends on people outside the country to send them money. So that's even like I get asked question like, are you gonna go back to Syria? Like, sorry, I have at least 10 people I'm supporting in Syria. Like, if I like quit my job in Canada and go back to Syria, like how like we will survive economically? And then there is report that they're not gonna support bread. And anyone, of course, like you, like if you know, in Syrian economy, bread was supported by the Syrian regime to be sold at more affordable prices. And people are hungry. A lot of people used to work with the Syrian government, and actually at a partner website with Jadaliyya, Salon Syria, we published recently a media report by a journalist who actually now, like under the Syrian regime, he was self-censoring himself. He's with the opposition, and he was publishing a report at Salon Syria and Jadaliyya under fake name. And now again, under the new caretaking government, he's publishing under fake name. Because, for example, there is tension. Like anyone who was working with the Syrian government considered like fulul al-nizam. But Syrian government controlled the economy, controlled like large opportunities of employment. So now how we will address this economic needs? There are really like a lot of urgent issues, but for me, like this economic needs and addressing collective trauma are top priorities.
Thank you very much, Katty. Basile, you're between us and freedom.
So my 2 cents are like you ask about realistically and practically. So I don't think it's, first of all, it's surprising that the Ahmed al-Shara became a de facto leader, whatever president for the transitional justice. That's not surprising given the compromises that he is engaging with other militias and other military factions. And for him, the priority is to have a monopoly over the physical use of violence in the Weberian definition. But that comes at the expense of, I think, that's the short-sighted version, at the expense of, which is symbolically represented in that image of having the backs and the bottom of these officers and factions turned back to Syrians who were expecting and promised to have a speech from Ashara. So that part is not surprising, but so why the fuss? Why all the broken promises in the past 52 days? Don't make these promises if that was your approach. At least it's clear right now. So that's one thing. So realistically, what could happen? I think if the question was, let's say, in the aftermath of the Arab Spring, let's say the regime collapsed 2011, 2012, the answer would be very difficult. Would be mostly centered around the state and its whatever expertise we have, and in connection with diasporic community who weren't in the country for 20, 30 years, etc. After 14 years, we have actually experienced and Syrians. Like you have, like Rabia, for instance, specialized, and yourself specialized in political economy, and this like we have. I can drop countless of names of Syrians who actually dedicated their life, rebuilt a new life in exile, to actually invest in this knowledge and contribute to the knowledge and the transitional justice in the future. We have these networks, we have these organizations, we have experts who can document violations, we have people who know how to analyze and use expertise in cooperation with international UN level of organization to investigate crimes. And specifically, like we have many disappeared and victims who only had numbers. We don't know how to track them down. We couldn't find them in the prison. I keep emphasizing this point because I don't see justice or post-Assad Syria without addressing seriously this term. What could be addressed realistically? Don't treat Syrians like as a de facto government, as you have two audiences. One, you look into their eyes directly and you host them, and the other look down to them. You don't face them face to face. You ask people basically to rely on, we heard someone was appointed on this position or that, based on rumors. Instead of using Sana or the Syrian TV that you have, they are relying on telegrams. And we have countless of fake accounts. Some of them belonged to the Ba'ath Party before, and they changed their names. So now it's on citizens who supposedly have access to internet 24 hours, where Syrians on the ground barely can get electricity between 2 hours to 4 hours. Another thing, historically, Damascus and Aleppo, but Damascus largely, was treated as basically as everything revolved around Damascus. And I think this is very problematic. Syria is not just Damascus. Syria is also Jobar, Ghouta, Qabun, which are completely Daraya, which are completely leveled. Syria is also includes the Kurdish area, is this northeast Syria. Syria is also Idlib, Latakia, Tartus, Salami, Sweda. So you have to deal with that. That's Syria. There is a difference between ruling a country based on your experience in one region, which is Idlib, with the expertise and that you have that doesn't match the needs of the country. And you can rule the country based on mentality that is more inclusive, more transparent, that make use of actual expertise that are already there. You don't need to train them, but the problem is you don't trust them. As a few days ago, I conclude with that. I had a meeting with the Syrian Association students, like at U of T, University of Toronto. So I asked them how old you were, like when the Arab Spring started, just to know my audience. No one was even 10 years old when the Arab Spring started, which means you have a generation that don't know that the HTS were themselves directly involved in actually war crimes. They don't have this image. They don't have this history. All parties involved, and the regime committed the most atrocious crimes, of course, but all parties were involved. But there is a purified, sanctified, rewritten history that's very problematic, because people are not acting as based on hypothetical fear, but because when there are violations, and you claim that after you have basically bots and the new Shabiha on social media attacking even the historically opposition figures, and accuse them basically of not being patient or give him another chance, or he doesn't have a asa sahriya or a magic wand. This is exactly Bashar al-Assad what he said. I don't have a magic wand. I don't have asa sahriya. I can't basically purge the old guard. Like that's the promise of modernization and development. And we paid a heavy tax for that. So in conclusion, we do have expertise. We do have more organization. We have specialists in political economy, in studies of identity, in studies of transitional justice, in law, in constitutions. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. The question is, are you willing to participate with all these components of Syrian to rebuild a new country for all? Or you are going to rule the country as a militia and domesticate everyone else to basically and blackmail them by using the need to have electricity and food and stability and security, which is a right, not basically a privilege. Thank you so much.
Shukran. Thank you, Basil. Thanks to all of you. Before we depart, I would like to emphasize what Katty shared about a website that is a sister website and project of Jadaliyya, which is Salon Syria. Can you say a word about it? I'm going to put it up on screen. This is Salon Syria. Well, it's in Arabic, but also has an English section. But most of the material is in Arabic. Katty, would you like to share just a few words about the project?
Yes, so we have been working on it for the last few years, and I think for anyone who's interested in Syria, especially to learn about perspective of journalists and media activists who are inside the country, most contributions we publish, the majority of it are from people from inside the country who report on different economic, social, and political issues since the fall of Al-Assad regime. We have published multiple important pieces. If our audience members want to check them out, as I said, the latest one was about an analysis of state media and what happened to it under the new caretaking government. So check it out. And if you are a journalist or media activist inside Syria, we also would love to collaborate with you further.
Thank you. And I'll also point out very quickly the Syria page on Jadaliyya, which also will be featuring increasingly more material on Syria going forward under the Syria Research Project in collaboration with SCPR, the Syrian Center for Policy Research and Security and Context, where Rabie is the director of the SCPR, of course. And let me just also affirm that Katty is the editor of the Salon Syria website. Thank you all so much, Basileus, Rabie, and Katty, for staying with us for 2 hours and sharing your insights. We hope to have you back, and we probably will be doing more in-depth conversations on particular issues going forward. I know that next month we have another session on this particular topic, sort of Syrian transition, a further review, and then we will do another at the end of the transitional period. But except that Rabie announced that it ended today, the transitional period ended today, and I think he was saying that in reference to the decisions that have been made today, within closed doors. Thanks to all of you who have followed this conversation. This was Syria and Transition, the first 45 days, sponsored by the Syria Research Project. And we hope to see you all soon. Stay safe. Shukran, everyone.
Thank you, Bassam.
شكرا جميعا شكرا.
Take care. Bye bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming, and thank you, Bassam, for organizing.
حبيبي. بعدين بسيل انت ضليت ابعت لك مسجز. I know this is live, بس زيح على الشمال شوي يعني بس هيك نقطة صغيرة دخيل عينك. اوكي السلام عليكم.
Bye bye.